Hello, everyone. I am Ashley, and I'm on the marketing team here at Candu. I'm here with Stepan. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Stepan. I'm a senior software engineer at Candu, and I do a whole bunch of stuff, like essentially working hard to create this wonderful product. And I've been engineering for roughly 14, 15 years. I've done a whole bunch of stuff to be here.
So we're happy to get some insights from you today, pull all that goodness out of your brain. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the dashboard just to start. But since this is an interview, I get to put you on the spot and pull up a few questions. And to start, I wanted to know what it's like to work with an ever-evolving tech stack as an engineer in SaaS. It doesn't necessarily have to apply to no-code solutions, just in general. What is it like to keep up with all this technology as a SaaS engineer?
It is ever-evolving for sure, and sometimes it is hard to keep up. There's always fear of missing out, but to be honest, like the dust is settling a little bit, and we can see the solutions that we experience with, that we're confident in, and it becomes easier and easier, pick the right solution, and just be calm and confident about it. So getting better for sure.
Thinking about no code, and we talked about this beforehand, and how does that fit into tech stacks? And I think you said it depends on what you mean by no code. So in this case, like how would a no code solution like Candu fit into a tech stack, and how do engineers think about that is probably the broader question.
It means by what you mean by no code, because sometimes it is like coding less or not coding at all. In general, developers are used to the idea of reusing third-party services and like libraries and stuff like that, because it's not just about spending less time coding, but also about being confident about the component you choose, because it's probably something you need to check. As in, if you pick some third-party component, it is usually covered by some tests, it's used by other people, backed by some company, and give you certain confidence that like you can use it. Plus, it saves you lots of time. So like, if before you would have to set up your own mail server to send an email programmatically, these days you just use some company like SendGrid. And it's pretty natural to extend this concept to areas when you empower your other coworkers in organizations who do not code, but just give them like the tools that they just make this decision. Okay, we're using this and that, and spend just a little bit of time to integrate something like Candu or SendGrid or like Calendly or any other tool, and then you can just relax and let your coworkers do this stuff and modify this content like without ever bothering you.
It's interesting you say relax, because this kind of leads into the next question. It seems that the no code movement, or even low code movement, is sometimes a touchy subject for engineers. And so when you're thinking about that as an engineer, how can you relax? And I feel like it's one of those topics that's maybe a little bit overblown, or it's clickbait. So how can we think about this in a way that it benefits engineers and helps them to relax? What's your take on that?
I guess engineers like to be in control, which makes total sense. And we want to be confident that something works fine. And when you use a third-party solution, any third-party solution, right, you are essentially giving up some form of control. Like you're not in control of this and that part. It's essentially outsourced to someone. But I guess all you need to do is to substitute the giving up control with letting go control, and just like make the right decision. As in, take some time to evaluate the project or product, the solution, play with it, make sure it's well tested, it has proof track record that you can be confident in, and just pick it, like integrate it once, and then you can just forget about it. If it's a good solution, if you made the right choice, and it is like an engineer's job to make those choices, right? Once it's done, you can pretty much relax. But I think also another reason why it is a touchy subject is that there is a lot of hype around the no code, the word itself and the movement and stuff like that. And it's pretty natural to be skeptical about hyped up things. But again, the dust is settling, and we are seeing players that have been there for a few years, and we can be confident enough to pick those players and just have some trust in them.
Yeah. Do you think it has something to do with the way some publications frame it as like citizen developer? There's talk in some of these like clickbait articles about how no code is threatening to take the jobs of engineers. So when you terms like citizen developer, do you think that leads people to believe that the average person is just totally taking over? So I think that's where that comes from.
Maybe, but I don't know. We developers have like interesting tasks and not so interesting tasks to do. And I will be so happy to have those not interesting to be taken over from me and not
Right.
be bothered about, so I can focus the actual like interesting and hard challenges than, I don't know, moving the buttons around. And I'm more than happy to give away this kind of power.
Yeah. And it's funny because like when you say uninteresting tasks, I think about somebody in my position in marketing. Like I actually enjoy doing those things, like in taking a style guide and manipulating colors and moving buttons around. So it's like what you're taking away from the engineers is like what sometimes the other teams actually want to be doing, and inspires
Exactly.
creativity. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And this kind of maybe leads into this question. How have your thoughts evolved being an engineer at a company that sells a no-code product? So you are an engineer, you work on this product that is no-code, low-code. Has that changed anything about the way you think about no code? What is that, I guess?
I think my view on code started changing earlier, as in, so for the context, like before I would reach for code to do pretty much everything. And like instead of, let's say I have some data, instead of just trying to process this data in some spreadsheets, I will always write some script to do that. But at some point, I guess I realized that you can do like alternative tools to coding, like that normal node programmers actually used to. As in, just the simplest example, nowadays I just do so much stuff with spreadsheets and actually find it fun because it is pretty empowering. And you have to worry about less things. But actually working at a no-code startup made me realize even more how, like, what kind of stuff people can build with a tool. Instead of giving people like a fixed user experience and fixed kind of flow of things, if you give them something flexible but yet simple, but still flexible, you can do so many amazing things with it that you never even imagined. And just seeing how it gives you like a certain faith in people, as in you get really fascinated by seeing what people can actually build with tools. And I think we should just all embrace tooling and have faith and trust in each other, definitely some trust in each other that everyone can build stuff themselves. And this is very amazing.
I wonder if maybe it has something to do with the high and low level tasks or parts of a product that are associated with customers. So like maybe you build a feature, customers have been asking for it, it's a bigger feature, it's very broad. But then on the lower level, you have these teams that are really tight with customers, customer success, for instance, like always on the pulse of what the customer is asking for. So the engineers have to focus on these big tasks like new features. And then that's where you get all of this other magic where you're really just constantly tailoring the user experience based on these micro iterations that you can do just on the fly, so that the engineers can focus on these big features that still make customers happy, but in a different way.
I think the key point here is that like people who work with customers, they're just so much closer and they know what the customers want, and they do those alterations, modifications, and just create something well tailored for a specific customer. And this is pretty amazing.
I worked in software implementation before, and you just know what the backlog looks like. And you know that when you say something like, I'll pass that on to our engineers, that you perhaps won't be passing that on to your engineers because it becomes too much. So I think what's so great is that somebody in that position can actually take charge of that feedback almost immediately without having to. They can give engineers a space to like make cool stuff without getting involved in these little details.
Okay.
Let's go on to how has Candu used no code as the tool in rapid iteration. So it jumps into that, but I know we think about the dashboard as a major part of this, and you mentioned dog fooding, and so I just love to get into that as well.
Yeah, we have this like screen here for a reason, and what it shows you is this like initial page you see when you log into Candu, and everything here apart from the sidebar is actually a Candu content, as in content that was created with Candu. And
go ahead and open up my dashboard for my personal. Okay,
so
I know what you're talking about here.
Yeah, this whole dashboard, this whole thing is built with Candu. And as developers, we only write maybe 2 lines of code just to integrate our script and maybe like some div with proper selector name, and that's pretty much all. And all this content is created and managed by people outside of engineering, marketing, customer success, and stuff like that. Engineers almost never have to touch this stuff. And what if it's not just the dashboard? If you look at this banner on the top that shows you embed content into your product, it's like our banner for the new users when they haven't like purchased a certain plan just yet. This is also made with Candu, and basically, as in like it is a Candu content. It was designed, created, like developers only had to do just some form of integration, and that again helps to save us so much time, so many engineering hours, and also create some specific content for specific users. Because if you as a customer was onboarded to do through some of our sales channels, there is a good chance you're getting a very personalized greeting on that dashboard. Like we'll have, hey, company name, welcome to Candu, and stuff like that. This is where content can be a little bit more personal for each individual customer. And again, no coding required, no developer involvement at all. Everything is done by customer success, marketing teams, and stuff like that. Yeah, it saves us lots of time.
Yeah, and maybe this is like when you talk about that personalization, and I think about, again, back to like my implementation days, I worked on a SaaS product that it was membership management software. So when you think about personalization, I believe the way it is, and I'm probably going to misuse terms here, but we've had to set up like a separate environment for each admin account. And so that meant, to a certain extent, recreating certain parts of the experience to personalize it for them, versus with Candu, you can build all of that in, from what I understand. Or how would that differ from like a typical SaaS product and inviting a new customer on board and that personalization?
Well, we have this maybe rather complex, but not so complex. Basically, we have this idea of segmentation. Basically, you can set like a bunch of rules that put different users onto different segments. Like you can say, okay, customers with that email from that company, they go to segment this, or the others go to segment that, and stuff like that. And we show different content to different segments. Actually, if you enable screen sharing for me, I can show you how it looks under the hood. There we go. This is how the dashboard looks from inside the editor. It's a bunch of different like embeds, like those like a separate Candu documents. Everything you see here is made with Candu. And if you say you open the trial banner, the banner itself with content, you can see that we have different versions of the same. And each tab here is assigned to a specific user segment. This is probably just a test. No one sees it. This is what everyone sees. Like when you set your organization, then you see the welcome organization name. This is like a variable that you can use variables as well in Candu content. If it is a return user, let's say some user joined the product but haven't used it in some time, but then comes back, you can show like a different message, or you can, I don't know, just create a segment from some specific company and then just show the completely different banner than everyone else's sees. So this system is pretty flexible. And even like when I say use different logic to show different stuff, it's actually not hard at all. As in here, you assign existing segment, but to create a segment, you don't have to know how to code or anything like that. You create a bunch of rules, like a bunch of conditions, and it's all like visual. And yeah, and again, no code required, pretty flexible. And you can do all this like wonderful stuff without engineering involvement at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of non-technical teams will be familiar with, especially on the marketing side, to me is a lot like an email editor. So like just going through and working on the different flows and the personalization, the variables that you have for that. It's very similar. So I think a lot of teams will recognize that advantage. And also it's interesting that if you are in there for the segments, you can see things like account team. And so it's also not just how you talk to an individual who has been inactive for some time, but specifically, how do you talk to somebody who's on an accounts team who has been inactive for some time? So it seems like you could get really hyper personal with some of the segment details and variables.
All of that is possible with our segmentation and custom content, and it's pretty simple to do. Yeah.
What are some examples of issues that shouldn't use no-code components as a solution? By issues, I mean like Jira or wherever you're working, whatever task you're working on, what would be an example of a situation where you wouldn't want to use a no-code element?
I guess it depends on what is actually possible right now. And obviously, if it's not possible, you will have to code something yourself. There really is no way around it, but eventually maybe everything will be possible. But there is a solution on the market that does what you want. And if it somehow ruins the experience or the performance of your app, I, as an engineer, will probably not use that product. But if it's good, like if it's fast, if it's integrates where it doesn't ruin user experience or company branding and stuff like that, then I see no reason why not to use a no-code solution. Maybe pricing, another issue. So like you have to be wise about it. As in, I saw a bunch of tools that actually design more towards programming the whole flows, and they, even though they're pretty nice, once you get over a certain user limit, it gets pretty expensive. So again, you have to choose wisely and make sure it fits the budget. Yeah, if everything is like, as an advice to some other engineer, I would say just take some time, evaluate everything. If it's good, if it does what you want, if it's not like crashing, if it's not doing anything, then it should be fine to use a no-code solution. If something is off, then probably not.
No one answer makes me think, obviously you and I are biased, but the idea of embedding a no-code element into your product or a component into your product versus having something that's popping up and could possibly cover up elements of the UI, I would say that's probably an advantage when we think about embedded inline content and how it could improve the experience. And maybe more often you can rely on these no-code tools when they're neatly integrated into the product versus maybe covering up some of the experience.
This is one of our selling points pretty much, as in we are a tool for creating content that you embed into existing content and that you can actually fine tune to the point that you will never spot a difference. It looks native to your application. It looks like a part of it, like it's all been like designed and coded by someone at the company. Yeah, this is really great.
Yeah, it makes non-technical teams feel like superheroes because you can take these elements and make it look like it's almost, because we've done that, Candu's done that, where we've recreated dashboards of other companies and things like that. So it's like you get this thrill of being able to match things very specifically. I'm a perfectionist, so that's the kind of stuff that is exciting.
Also, getting back to my point about seeing what people do with the stuff, it was very fascinating to see like when all my colleagues were reusing the checklist component. So basically went to the style guide and just reconfigured pretty much everything to the point that checklist was not a checklist anymore, but more like an accordion kind of component. So it's like, I did not expect it to be used like that, but that's pretty cool.
I guess, and that kind of leads into the next question maybe is, okay, so you have this style guide, you're doing all these things, you're making it cool. In line, how can these cross-functional teams that are non-technical support engineers? And part of this we've answered, just in general, they can get away from these smaller tasks that maybe they don't enjoy as much. But maybe when it comes to implementation of these tools and these components, how can they do it without maybe stepping on an engineer's toes or like messing with a sprint cycle and a new feature release or something like that? Is there any advice that you have in that area or anything that you've observed that poses a challenge and maybe how to solve?
I guess it's hard to give like a single answer to that problem, but I think if you found some interesting solution and you have a vision for how to fit it into your kind of application or your workflow, or as in, because not every project has to be like what it is actually visible. Sometimes it's just like something visible, some internal tool or something like that. If you see how well it fits, just demo it to people and just show people what can be done and explain that you don't have to do so much integration or so much work anymore. Just demo, just show something and show probably, just to give like a non-biased example, I remember when Notion was still new, and it's still not exactly like a no-code tool, but it's a good example of a tool that is a set of building blocks and you can build so much stuff with it, with Notion. And I remember just demoing people that, okay, Notion can be used for knowledge management, for ad hoc CRM, for managing sprints or stuff like that. And people just, okay, that looks cool. They just started using it. Eventually everyone got excited about it. I think the key point there was me being passionate about the tool and sharing it with my coworkers and sharing this passion as well. Everyone is into Notion. You don't have to convince everyone.
And it is a lot easier when you can show it off immediately. Headphones, you can show it off immediately versus a lot of people who are on the product management side or even UX, we're used to like maybe doing wireframes and these kind of like really basic concepts before we could get to the actual proof of concept. So it's nice to be able to just like literally build out what you're passionate about, what you're excited about, and prove to people in almost real time why you want to adopt a solution or why it's going to work. Yeah. And I guess the last question is like one of those elephant in the room type things is like, is there any risk involved when you think about security or anything like that, as far as implementing a no-code solution, or just how can we minimize those risks, or if there are any?
Yeah, there is a certain risk because when you are integrating something into your application, you probably integrating some third-party code, relying on some third-party services. There is always like risk involved, and I guess as an engineer or some other technical person, you have to think about stuff like that and be careful about it. But I guess it is about just spending some time to thoroughly review how it works, what it does, and stuff like that. In our case, for example, we are happy to talk to customers and to address their concerns about or explain how architecture works. And yeah, but because maybe for the companies who provide no-code solutions and like integrations, probably just to architect the solution, but to architect their software in a way that it's like less prone to like crashes and mistakes and stuff like that. And for example, if like with Candu, for example, if the editor crashes or some analytic stuff is down, anything can happen, right? The content should still be visible, right? It should still be there because the content that you created and published is actually static. We solve it like we just architect in a way that is just more reliable than like calling some dynamic API to show you something. And we still have we have SDK, for example, that you integrate into your page. Again, there is certain risk related to it, but we're constantly improving our processes. I think every month we are drastically simplifying the SDK just to keep it more and more minimal and do some of this stuff like elsewhere just to reduce the risks of the SDK crashing something. And again, I'm sorry, it's not like a simple answer, but this is where it gets technical. Engineers have to be technical. Engineers have to like tricky questions each other and just get deep into implementation, figure out how it works. It might be a bit of an effort, but if you need like a simple answer, okay, like if it's see who's using that product, if the product is big enough, is it backed by a good investment and it has a good track record, then it can serve as a shortcut to make this decision. Say again, like, people use Google Tag Manager without thinking too much. People embedding YouTube videos as an iframes without thinking too much because they trust company like Google. And I hope we can reach that level of trust and other providers can reach the trust. And yeah, we can just rely on each other a bit more and be chill about it. And
the level of chillness. I think, no, you do bring up a good point though, because there is some risk involved with any product that you're going to add to your tech stack. It adds like a level of complication, or not maybe complication, but just complexity to all of the systems that you're working with. I think it's a matter of what's the reward, how much time are you saving, how much more efficient, and if there is a risk, is it a big one? And I think these are the questions that engineers probably have to think of when they consider these. And so it isn't a simple answer, but it's more of an answer of how we think about the life cycle overall and how all of these things fit. All right. Honestly, I don't think I have anything else for you. I've actually really enjoyed this conversation and its perspective. Yeah. And I don't often get to talk to engineers, so on the marketing side. So it's good.
Thank you for having me. It's been joyful, like talking about stuff. Sorry for bragging all this and getting too technical, but I couldn't resist. Yeah. And for everyone else who's watching this video, I hope you liked it. Hope you go ahead and try Candu or some other no-code solution these days. This is so fun and just play with it, have fun, and hopefully.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And have a good day, everyone.